lesson, we will read a third grade text and answer comprehension questions at the end. You can find the Digging for Dinos Passage 2 lesson in the video description at the end. So I will read it aloud and go over our key literary elements to begin. And we have a little blurb at the top. While on vacation with his parents, Benny is digging for dinosaur fossils and makes a surprising discovery. Young boys are not the only creatures who lose teeth. So this will be an interesting one. Digging for dinosaurs was hot work. Benny sat back on his heels and took a long drink from his water bottle. At first, when Mom and Dad had told him they were going on a dinosaur dig for vacation, he'd been excited. He'd bragged to his friends that he'd find the skeleton of a never-before-discovered dinosaur. The Benosaurus, they'd probably name it. But the real dig wasn't at all what he'd expected. For starters, he wasn't even digging. No shovels, Dave, the paleontologist in charge, told them. Any dinosaur bones buried here should be within a couple of feet of the surface. We don't want to risk clunking around and breaking them. Then he'd handed out ice picks and paintbrushes and showed everyone how to chip and brush away sand and dirt, slowly and carefully, a little bit at a time. The most important thing is knowing where to look, Dave said. Some rocks aren't old enough to have dinosaur bones. Other rocks are too old. We've studied this area before and found lots of fossils, so I'm hopeful you'll find some too. Well, that had been 2 days ago, and so far the most exciting thing Ben had found was his front tooth was loose. He wiggled it now. If he couldn't find any dinosaur bones, at least he could show his friends back home that he'd lost another tooth. Dave crouched beside Benny. "How's it going?" he asked. "Okay," Benny said. It didn't seem very nice to say that he was bored. "This is pretty slow." Dave nodded. "Yep," he agreed. "It's hard work. Sometimes paleontologists and fossil hunters look for weeks without finding anything. And we hardly ever find a whole skeleton," he added. "You know, Ben, if you're tired of searching, you can always help someone else on the crew." Benny looked around the dry, rocky hillside. Dave's assistants were busy taking photographs and drawing pictures and making charts. Some were using GPS devices to make maps of the area. Some were writing in notebooks. Dave said it was important to take good field notes to record exactly what you did and where you were when you looked for fossils. Benny thought holding the GPS tool might be fun, but he wasn't giving up. "I'll keep looking," he said. But, he added, thinking out loud, the pictures always show dinosaurs in swampy places. Did they live in deserts too? "Ah," said Dave. "Some probably did. But not around here. Millions of years ago, this wasn't a desert. It was wet and green and lush. The Earth's changed a lot since the time of the dinosaurs." Dave slapped Benny on the back and got to his feet. "Keep up the good work, Ben," he said encouragingly. "I think today will be your lucky day." Pick, chip, brush, and sweep. Benny bent over his patch of rocky ground and carefully cleared away the sand and gravel. When he needed a break, he wiggled his loose tooth. The sun climbed higher and hotter into the sky. He was getting into the rhythm of things. Either that or the heat was making him drowsy. And then it happened. "My tooth," Benny said, surprised. He stared down at the dirt. "My tooth," Benny whooped. "My dinosaur tooth." "I found a real live dinosaur tooth." Dave hurried over to look, careful not to disturb the ground in front of Benny's find. "Well, I'll be," he said. "It's a tooth, all right." "What kind is it?" Benny asked excitedly. "Is it T-Rex, Apatosaurus, Triceratops?" Dave laughed, but he kept studying the fossil in the ground. "Well, Ben," he finally said, "I've seen a lot of dinosaur teeth, but this one's different. I think you may have found one we haven't seen before. Good job." So, in the end, we have his conflict of his loose tooth. You could also say his conflict was being bored at this dig site. But we have the big discovery. Now he is no longer bored, and him and Dave, the lead paleontologist, are joking together. So now you can take some time to answer our questions that follow, and then we will go over them together. Now, our first question is talking about a vocabulary term. We have here, paleontologist. It wants to know, do they dig deep in the ground, study ancient animal bones, lead big teams, or find complete animal skeletons? Now, if we didn't know what a paleontologist was, when we go back into our paragraphs, so if this would be paragraph 2, did the paleontologist in charge told them any dinosaur bones buried here should go back a couple of feet of the surface. We don't want to risk clunking around and breaking them. So clearly, the paleontologist is someone who does things with bones and digging. And anytime you have something that ends in ologist, that would be some type of profession that a person has. So technically, professionals do lead big teams. And they could find complete animal skeletons, but there would probably be times where the skeletons were not very complete. And in order to become a professional of anything, you have to study it. So someone who's a paleontologist is someone who studies ancient animal bones and ancient things. And, well, in this case, dinosaurs. I didn't know we also had paragraph 7. Some paleontologists and fossil nodes look for weeks without finding anything, and we hardly ever find a whole skeleton. So that could be another clue there as to if we were in between finds a complete animal skeleton, because that would be the goal of a paleontologist. But in this case, they don't always find it, so they're definitely studying things. So then our next question, another one about paragraph 7. What does Dave's offer show about him? So now, if we go to paragraph 7, we had, let's see here. We have 2, 4 here. It's hard work. Wait, Ben, if you're tired of searching, you can always help someone else on the crew. Now, we might think that Benny, we know that he was feeling bored, but he didn't want to say he was bored. But he probably looks pretty bored. And we also know that he wasn't really expecting this. So when he got to this site for his vacation, he didn't know that it was going to be so uneventful, where they're really not digging. They're kind of gently brushing the surface, and a lot of walking around and just observing and looking at things. So when Dave asks him that, we might say the reason is he is concerned that Ben is feeling unhappy. He hopes that Ben will work harder than he has seen. He needs Ben to work with some others in the group. He worried that Ben will become careless with tools. Well, he was offering him to use the tools, so he must not have been concerned he was going to be careless of the tools. And for this one, considering this is supposed to be Ben's vacation, like a family vacation place, we wouldn't assume that Dave wants Ben to be working incredibly hard. He probably wants him to be enjoying himself. So here we can assume the reason it shows that he is concerned that Ben is unhappy. So we could say that Dave is characterized as empathetic, someone who shows empathy for others when they see that they're bored. So for that one, it has to be A. And then paragraphs 9 through 11 show that Benny knows about change that took place over time, prefers working in cooler weather, enjoys thinking out loud, continues to work hard. So if we go back to paragraphs 9, and if this one's 7, so we have 8, 9. So now we have Benny thinking about the GPS tool. It might be fun, but he wasn't giving up. I'll keep looking. And then we also have 9 through 11. This is where he's asking about, he wants to know more about the dinosaurs here. And then Dave talks about how the climate of the earth, the landscape of the earth has changed throughout the centuries. And then this is Benny's inner monologue, you could say. A monologue is when the character is talking to themselves. So he is thinking to himself. That is something he's doing. But now, if we go back to our questions here, it shows he doesn't know about the changes that took place over time because he was asking Dave about that. He might prefer to work in cool weather, but he's not really thinking too much about it being hot. It does seem like he Is Joyce thinking out loud? But wait, he's not actually talking out loud. He's thinking in his head. So he's thinking, yes. But for a question like this, continues to work hard, this would be a better answer choice for us here, because continuing to work hard shows his characterization and his work ethic of being someone who is determined and doesn't give up. So that's what this question is asking, more for a character trait here of Ben. And his continuing to work hard shows that he is a motivated person that doesn't give up. Which paragraph shows a change in Benny's feelings? So this one's going to be tricky, because you would want to number your paragraphs here so you can go back and look, because we're going to have paragraphs 4, 8, 9, and 12. This would be paragraph 4. The most exciting thing was found that it was his loose tooth. If he couldn't find any dinosaur bones, at least he could show his friends back home he'd lost another tooth. That one isn't too much of a change there. And then we would have paragraph 8. And paragraph 8 would be this one. He's just basically looking around, still bored here, right? Looking at what they're doing, because then this would be paragraph 9. But he wasn't giving up. I'll keep looking. So he doesn't have too much of a change in his his motivations here. It's kind of the same. And then we would have his tooth. So in this one, our paragraph 14, 12, and then it happened. My tooth, Benny said, surprised. So out of this one, if we're looking for a change in feelings, being surprised would most definitely be an example of a feeling. So that would be our feeling paragraph there. And it shows a definite change. How is the dig? Different from what Benny thought. This one goes from our beginning. Benny uses brushes rather than shovels. Benny did not expect the land to be so hilly. Benny did not expect to find so many workers. Benny has to help the assistants. Well, for this one, we know he didn't have to help anyone, so it can't be D. And he never said anything about the workers or how many there were. And he certainly didn't say anything about it being hilly. But if we go back and check our answer there was definitely a part where he said he had been excited, but there wasn't even digging. You don't want to risk clunking around. Then he handed out ice picks and paintbrushes. So that was something we can find as evidence in the text that tells us it has to be A. And that would be our reading comprehension for digging for dinos.